Brexit Britain to the world.
Well, there's one good thing to come out of these European elections, and that is the fact that UKIP is dead. May it rest in peace. The only clear choice that the hard Brexiteers had has been decimated in these elections, which is really a sign that Tommy Robinson isn't as popular as he thinks he is. Gerard Baton has, of course, been associating himself with Tommy Robinson. He had him as an advisor to the party, and that has basically killed UKIP. It's now seen as being too far to the right, even for the extreme right-wingers. So voting is still being counted, but as I record this, UKIP's got 17 councillors across England, and they have lost 54. So they are down by 76%. But they're not the only ones. The Tories are down, 26% down for them. Labour down by 8%. The Lib Dems up 147%. The Greens up by 700%. Now, both of those are from a small base, but both are parties wanting no Brexit. Add them together, they've got 2/3 of the number of votes that Labour has got. And as well, we've got this big surge in independent councillors. It's just about trebled, which just shows people are not happy with any of the main parties. They are as mad as hell, and they're not going to take this anymore. I just had a rather alarmed looking cat sitting next to me when I said that. Look, I had the choice. This whole thing is a bit skewed because the local elections are largely in rural areas. They're predominantly Tories. So the Tories were going to do better than anybody else. It's just that they have lost out so much. But also, you know, it could be worse. The only reason it's not worse for the Tories is there's so little choice. I had the choice of 4 candidates in my ward. 2 of them are Conservative. One was for the Residents' Association, and one of them is for the Lib Dems. Cosmo Patrick Lupton is the Lib Dems candidate. We're voting just to have someone called Cosmo in public office, as opposed to Jeremy or James or Boris or Tiffany. But no opportunity there, is there, for a protest vote? You can either vote Conservative, Residents' Association, who probably will pick up some, or the Lib Dems. Whereas, you know, we used to have, whatever happened to the Monster Raving Loony party when we need it? The one chance we had, and they had, the one chance for them to actually win an election, and they are nowhere to be seen. Well, when I say that, actually, they did stand in just one place, just up the road from me, actually, in Fleet. Where is Fleet? In Hampshire. Howling Laud Hope. Howling Laud Hope. Woohoo! Was standing. Can we have him as Prime Minister? I just like the idea that if we're going to have Boris Johnson, Howling Laud Hope, I mean, they're pretty much one of a kind, aren't they? They both sound a bit... His manifesto, this is Howling Laud Hope, not Boris's, although I suspect they're pretty similar. He says, if you always wish you could vote for none of the above, vote for me, because I am none of the above. If you don't usually vote, then vote unusually. Vote for me. The man's he's got an argument there, hasn't he? The only thing is, I think they might all be a bit Brexit-ish in the Monster Raving Loony party, which scares me away from them a little bit. But you know what? I don't care anymore about Brexit. I'm beginning to think now, like everybody else now, I might be the last one to have reached this stage. I am just tired with it. Look, I won't lose out if it all goes pear-shaped. I'll just, fuck off back to Australia, basically. What's the worst that could happen? The pound plummets, we get long queues at airports. But look, a summer holiday in Devon is lovely. Or you could just sit at home and watch reruns of A Place in the Sun. And remember those old days when people were actually able to retire to Europe. And now it's Skegness. It's so bracing. Any time of the year. So look, in the election results, they are still coming in. Labour was completely done over in Bolsover. Now, there's a newspaper headline. Labour done over in Bolsover. Look, I'm available for sub-editing contracts if you want one. They had 32 Labour councillors in Bolsover. Now it's 18, just narrowly ahead of the Independents, who gained 11 seats to 16. Where the heck is Bolsover, you ask? Well, it's in Derbyshire. And guess what? It's up north. They voted to leave. Over 70% of the Bolsover folk voted to leave, and they're clearly not happy with Labour siding with the Tories to reach a deal. And so they've sent that clear message and done over Labour in Bolsover, just in case you missed the headline the first time. Conversely, Winchester, which was almost 60% Remain, has seen the Lib Dems take control from the Tories in this election. So a clear message the other way, and it shows Mr. Corbyn has to decide. Don't sit on the fence, Mr. Corbyn. It must be getting uncomfortable by now. Go for one or the other. A hard Brexit and win over the people of balls over, or go for a second vote and win the likes of Winchester. And we know, of course, which one is more the Labour heartland. Winchester, no, I don't think so. Or somewhere up north that we've never heard of. Balls over. But, it's too late now anyway, obviously, because the election's all over. But there are European elections coming up. You could argue that some people will have voted on local issues in this local election. Perish the thought. So maybe the protest vote is going to actually be much larger in the European elections because, frankly, who cares? If we're going to leave, who cares who we vote for in the European elections? Look, the polls are showing the newly formed Brexit party is going to get 30% of the vote as it stands. Labour 21%, the Tories only 13%. They are going to get trounced. And 10% for the Lib Dems, another 18% for the Greens and Change UK. Actually, if you add the Greens, Change and the Lib Dems together, that's 28%. That is more than Labour. And, way more than the Tories. In fact, it's pretty close to the Brexit party. So, even though the Brexit party are steaming ahead because they are the only clear choice for people who really want to leave, if you look at some of the parties that are saying, yes, well, actually, we want to remain, it's pretty much neck and neck on that basis. And then, Labour and Tories sitting on the fence and, just farting about, really, basically, I think is the technical term for what they're doing. But none of it really matters, as I say, because if we're going to leave, who cares what we vote for? In a way, it's a bit like a de facto second referendum, really, isn't it? This European election, which makes you wonder why not just actually, because this is going to have not a clear spelt out answer. Why not just have another referendum and ask the question? And then we will have a clear answer, because I'm sure the leavers think they'll win. So let's do it and see. Otherwise, let's just say Howling Laud Hope for PM. I don't know how we get him into that position, but he's the best hope we've got. The best hope is Howling Laud Hope. Never met the man. He's just a councillor in Fleet. But he probably talks more sense than anyone else. Look, a quick look at what happened today in history before we go. This is just a bit of a short edition today. It's just a bit of a rush job. Ironic, I wasn't going to do one, but I thought I've got to do a podcast to cover off the elections, haven't I? Otherwise, where will you get your news from? Well, okay, ITV, the BBC, Channel 5, Channel 4, the newspapers. But, where will you get the objective news? You get from Balls Radio. Ironically, Machiavelli was born today, 1469, in Florence. He wasn't really an example of a Machiavellian politician. He just wrote about it. He wrote a book called The Prince, which was about Caesar Borgia, a prince of the Papal States. And based on him, he basically said the ideal leader is someone who is a moral, a calculating tyrant for whom the end justifies the means. So maybe Theresa May is onto something. Do you think? In fact, even Nigel Farage, can you imagine if he ever held a position of real power? Imagine what sort of tyrant he could become. He could become quite Machiavellian, couldn't he? I mean, we know nothing about Nigel Farage. He's getting 30% of the European votes, but we know nothing about him apart from, two things he stands for. A, leaving the EU. B, drinking beer. Is there anything more to know about Nigel Farage, I wonder? It's also the year, 12 years ago, the day I should say, 12 years ago, that Madeleine McCann went missing. £11.6 million later, we are still none the wiser. It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, you don't want to blame the parents on this, but she was just 4 years old. You just don't do that. You don't leave a 4-year-old alone at night or ever, do you? You always make sure your 4-year-old is in safe hands at school. I'm trying to convince my wife it's safe to leave our 12-year-old at home alone. And, he's going to be fine. Our 12-year-old, unless the Wi-Fi goes off, in which case I don't know, he'd be devastated. He'd call the emergency services probably. This day in 1947, Emperor Hirohito is stripped of all his powers in Japan. A new constitution goes into effect, largely the works of Douglas MacArthur. The Japanese had an attempt. This is, of course, after the Second World War, had an attempt to come up with their own new constitution, but it was unacceptable. So the Americans told them what it's going to be like. And Douglas MacArthur and his cronies wrote it for them. Does this have shades of Brexit about it? our deal was unacceptable. So Michel Barnier, not exactly a modern day Douglas MacArthur, but he's telling us how it should be. Anyway, the Japanese couldn't make war anymore, basically, was the gist of it. They couldn't make war. They could only make love, which is why there are now 127 million of them, although it has started to decline a bit lately. So clearly they've lost a bit of interest there. And that's it for now. That'll do. That's Balls Radio. We'll do some more next week, probably.
Balls Radio, the UK. From a Brexit Britain to the world.